Welcome back to the channel, coin lovers, history hunters, and treasure dreamers. Today you are about to hear one of the most unbelievable penny stories ever told. A story that proves that even the smallest coin in your pocket can carry a jaw-dropping secret. So settle in, imagine the sound of old change rattling in a jar, and let your curiosity wake up as we dive deep into the incredible legend of the 1971 1-cent USA coin, a humble Lincoln penny that in certain rare circumstances has been linked to an astonishing value of up to $37 million, a number that sounds impossible until you understand the strange mix of minting errors, production mistakes, transitional metal mysteries, historical timing, and collector obsession that surround this coin. Because the 1971 penny was born during a fascinating era in American coinage, when the United States Mint was under pressure to modernize, reduce costs, and correct past issues. Yet in that rush and experimentation some extraordinary anomalies slipped through, and those anomalies are what collectors hunt today like buried treasure. Because in 1971 the standard 1-cent coin was supposed to be struck in a copper alloy consisting of mostly copper with small amounts of zinc and tin, weighing around 3.11 grams, featuring Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. Minted primarily in Philadelphia with no mint mark and in Denver with a D mint mark. And on the surface millions of these pennies look completely ordinary, passed from hand to hand, spent on candy, dropped in couch cushions, and forgotten in drawers. But hidden among those millions are a handful of coins that tell a very different story. Coins that should not exist yet somehow do. Coins that reveal mistakes so dramatic that they rewrite what we thought we knew about penny production. And one of the most talked about possibilities involves transitional planchet errors. Because during the late 1960s and early 1970s the U.S. Mint was constantly testing alternative metals due to rising copper prices, experimenting with aluminum, bronze variations, and other alloys. And although the famous aluminum cents are often associated with 1974, experimental blanks and test planchets were being handled earlier, meaning that in 1971 there is a rare but electrifying possibility that a small number of pennies were accidentally struck on experimental or wrong metal planchets, such as aluminum, brass variants, or even leftover bronze blanks intended for other years. And when a 1971 cent appears dramatically lighter than normal, non-magnetic, with an unusual color, sound, or surface texture, collectors immediately take notice, because a confirmed wrong planchet 1971 cent would represent a major mint error with historical importance, potentially unique or nearly unique, driving its value into the millions due to demand from elite collectors and museums. And then there is the equally fascinating realm of double die errors, where the coin design was impressed twice at slightly different angles due to misalignment in the die creation process, resulting in visible doubling on letters like Liberty, Indiana God We Trust, or the date 1971 itself. And while minor doubling is common, a strong dramatic double die obverse or reverse from 1971 would be an absolute sensation, especially if the doubling is bold, clean, and spread, creating a visually stunning effect that collectors can see with the naked eye. And when such a coin is preserved in near-perfect condition, graded at the highest levels by professional services, its rarity combined with eye appeal can push prices into staggering territory, especially if it is the finest known example, because in the coin world condition is king and population reports matter deeply. And beyond double dies we step into the world of off-metal strikes, broad strikes, and misaligned dies, or coins were struck without collars causing them to spread wider than normal, or struck partially off-center leaving blank areas where the design should be. And while many off-center coins exist, the most valuable ones are those that remain fully dated and identifiable while showing extreme error characteristics. And a 1971 cent struck dramatically off-center yet still clearly showing the full date and mint details would be considered a premium error. But the story does not end there, because some of the most valuable error pennies ever discovered involve multiple errors on a single coin, known as combination errors, such as a double die struck on a wrong planchet and then struck off center, an almost mythical scenario. Yet, history shows that the minting process can produce exactly such freak results under the right conditions, and a 1971 cent displaying multiple confirmed errors would become a once-in-a-generation discovery, igniting bidding wars among top collectors, auction houses, and private buyers. And then there is the mystery of proof errors, because proof coins are specially struck with polished dies and planchets intended for collectors, usually not meant for circulation. Yet occasionally proof dies are accidentally used for regular strikes or proof coins escape into circulation, and a 1971 proof sent with errors such as a double die, missing elements, or struck on a wrong planchet would be an astonishing find, especially if authenticated and linked to mint documentation or known error patterns. And we cannot ignore the potential of mule errors, where mismatched obverse and reverse dies from different years or designs are paired together, a phenomenon that has produced some of the most valuable modern coins ever sold. And while no widely confirmed 1971 cent mule has been publicly documented, the mere possibility fuels collector imagination, because if a 1971 Lincoln obverse were somehow paired with an incorrect reverse die from another year or experimental design, the result would be a coin so unique that its value would be limited only by how much someone is willing to pay, which is how figures like $37 million enter the conversation, because at that level we are no longer talking about face value or even typical collector pricing. We are talking about cultural artifacts, museum-grade objects, and symbols of numismatic legend. And another critical factor is die state anomalies, such as die cracks, die breaks, cuds, and retained cuds, where parts of the die break away creating raised blobs or missing details on the coin. And while minor die cracks are common, massive dramatic die breaks that alter the appearance of Lincoln's portrait or the memorial can become highly desirable, especially if they are unique to a short run of coins and clearly visible. And add to that the possibility of strike-through errors where foreign material like grease, cloth fibers, or metal shavings were struck into the coin, leaving mysterious voids or textures. And suddenly the 1971 cent becomes a playground of possibilities for error hunters, and as collectors study these coins under magnification, weighing them, measuring them, listening to their ring when dropped, comparing them to known standards, they unlock stories frozen in metal. And the reason values can climb so high is not just rarity but narrative, because the coin market thrives on stories, on first discoveries, on coins that challenge assumptions, and when a previously unknown major error surfaces, especially from a popular series like the Lincoln set, which millions of people collect worldwide, demand can explode overnight, pushing prices far beyond what traditional guides predict. And we must also consider condition rarity, because most 1971 cents were heavily circulated. So finding any error coin from that year in pristine mint state condition with full luster, sharp strike, and minimal contact marks is extraordinarily difficult. And when you combine extreme rarity with exceptional preservation, you create the perfect storm for record-breaking prices, especially when auction houses hype the discovery, media outlets spread the story, and social media turns it viral, drawing in not only seasoned collectors, but also investors and dreamers who want to own a piece of history. And this is how a penny transforms from pocket change into a multi-million-dollar icon. And it's important to understand that values like $37 million are not about everyday examples, but about hypothetical or legendary specimens, often unique or nearly unique, representing the pinnacle of error collecting. And they remind us that coins are not just money but time capsules, capturing moments when machines failed, humans made mistakes, and history took an unexpected turn. And for the viewer watching this right now, the magic lies in the possibility that such treasures might still be out there, hiding in old jars, inherited collections, or rolls of pennies forgotten in bank vaults, waiting for someone curious enough to look closely, because every great coin discovery started with someone paying attention, someone who didn't dismiss a strange-looking coin, someone who asked why this penny feels lighter, why this date looks doubled, why this color seems off, and that sense of wonder is what drives the hobby forward, making the 1971 1-cent coin not just a piece of copper but a symbol of hidden wealth and historical mystery. And as you continue exploring the world of rare coins, remember that knowledge is your greatest tool, patience your greatest ally, and curiosity your greatest treasure. Because you never know when the next legendary penny might reveal itself and change everything you thought you knew about value, history, and the power of a single cent. Next, 1982 D1-cent USA coin. Today's journey dives into one of the most dramatic and confusing years in modern American coinage. A year so full of change, mistakes, and overlapping production methods that it created legends still shaking the numismatic world today. Because the 1982 D1-cent USA coin is not just another Lincoln penny. It is the center of one of the greatest transition stories in U.S. mint history, a coin born at the exact moment when metal prices, economic pressure, and mint experimentation collided, producing errors and variations so rare and so misunderstood that certain confirmed examples have been linked to breathtaking values reaching as high as $29 million, and that number alone should make anyone stop scrolling, lean closer, and listen carefully, because 1982 is the single most complex year for Lincoln since ever produced. The only year in which the mint officially struck pennies in two completely different metal compositions for circulation, copper and zinc, while also using different die styles, different weights, and multiple mint facilities, all under intense pressure to reduce costs as copper prices soared. And in that chaos, the Denver Mint, identified by the D Mint mark, became a hotspot for some of the most fascinating and valuable mint errors ever theorized, because until 1982 pennies were primarily made of 95% copper, weighing about 3.11 grams. But starting in 1982 the mint shifted to a zinc core with a thin copper plating, weighing only about 2.5 grams, and this change did not happen cleanly or instantly. Instead it unfolded in stages, overlapping production runs, mixed planchets, hurried die changes, and human oversight, which is exactly how ultra-rare coins are born. And the 1982 D-cent sits right in the eye of that storm, because Denver struck pennies only with a small date style that year. Yet even within that limitation, astonishing anomalies have surfaced or are strongly believed to exist, including wrong planchet strikes, transitional metal errors, and die anomalies that challenge official mint records. And one of the most powerful drivers behind the $29 million valuation discussion is the possibility of a 1982 D small date cent struck on a 95% copper planchet that should never have been used at Denver that year, because according to standard mint documentation, Denver pennies in 1982 were supposed to be struck on zinc planchets, while Philadelphia handled most of the copper issues. So if a genuine 1982 D copper set exists, confirmed by weight, metallurgical analysis, and professional grading services, it would represent a monumental error, a coin that contradicts official production data, instantly placing it among the rarest modern U.S. coins ever conceived. And rarity of that magnitude is exactly what fuels values in the tens of millions, especially when collector demand is global and fierce, because Lincoln cents are collected by beginners and elite numismatists alike, meaning the buyer pool is enormous. And when something unique or nearly unique appears in such a popular series, competition becomes explosive. And then there is the small date versus large date confusion that defines 1982, because the mint used two different date punch styles that year, with subtle but important differences in the shape of the two, the curvature of the 8, and the spacing of the digits. Differences that casual observers often miss, but advanced collectors obsess over. And when a rare metal composition is paired with the wrong date style or an unexpected mint mark, the result becomes exponentially more valuable, and collectors have spent decades weighing, measuring, and studying 1982 cents because even a fraction of a gram difference can mean the difference between a common coin and a multimillion-dollar discovery. And beyond metal composition, we enter the world of double dies, where some 1982 dies show noticeable doubling on the date, on Liberty, or on In God We Trust, caused by misalignment during the die creation process, and while minor doubling exists, a strong, clean double die obverse from Denver combined with a transitional planchet error would be the kind of coin that instantly rewrites price guides and auction records. And then, there are off-metal errors, such as cents struck on planchets intended for foreign coins, dimes, or even experimental blanks, which can happen when planchet supplies overlap or are improperly cleared for machinery, and an off-metal 1982 cent, especially one confirmed to be struck on a copper alloy or an experimental composition, would be a museum-level artifact, not just a collectible, and that is how values escalate into the realm of millions, because at that level the coin is no longer just being sold to one collector, it becomes a cultural object, something institutions want to display, something investors want to own, something the numismatic community rallies around as a symbol of discovery, and we cannot ignore striking errors like broad strikes where the coin spreads wider than normal due to a missing collar, or off-center strikes where part of the design is missing. And while many such errors exist, the most valuable are those that remain fully dated and identifiable while showing dramatic visual impact, because collectors want errors that tell a story at a glance. And when an off-center or broad-struck 1982 cent also carries the correct weight for a copper planchet instead of zinc, the value jumps from thousands to millions almost instantly in theoretical and private sale discussions. And then, there is the possibility of die clashes, where obverse and reverse dies strike each other without a planchet between them, leaving ghost-like impressions of the opposite design on the coin. And while die clashes alone are not extremely rare, dramatic clashes combined with transitional metal errors are almost unheard of, and the 1982 year offers fertile ground for such combinations because of the frantic pace of production and die changes, and condition plays an enormous role as well, because most 1982 cents were heavily circulated, so finding any extreme error from that year in mint state condition with full original luster, sharp strike, and minimal marks is extraordinarily difficult, and when such a coin is certified as the finest known example, population reports amplify its importance, because collectors will pay staggering premiums to own the best, the only, or the first discovered specimen. And this is where auction psychology comes into play, because once a coin is labeled as unique or potentially unique, bidding becomes emotional, driven by fear of missing out, prestige, and the desire to be part of history, and that emotional energy is what turns a theoretical value into a real one. And the $29 million figure often discussed in connection with the 1982 cent reflects that upper ceiling, the price that could be achieved if the perfect storm coin were discovered, authenticated, and brought to market under the spotlight of major auction houses, media attention, and viral storytelling, because modern coin legends spread fast, and when people realize that a penny from their lifetime could be worth more than mansions, supercars, and private islands, interest explodes, and the final piece of this puzzle is the human element. Because every legendary coin was once ignored, overlooked, or misunderstood, and the 1982 cent reminds us that history is not always neat, that official records can be incomplete, that mistakes happen even in highly controlled systems, and that extraordinary value often hides in ordinary places, waiting for someone patient enough to weigh a coin, inspect a date, question a detail, and refuse to assume that common always means worthless. And that is why this story matters, because it transforms a simple penny into a symbol of possibility, a reminder that knowledge plus curiosity can unlock doors most people walk past every day. And as you continue watching, searching, and learning, Remember that the next great discovery does not announce itself with fireworks, it whispers from the bottom of a coin jar, and sometimes, just sometimes, that whisper is worth $29 million. And as we continue deeper into the legend of the 1982 D1 cent coin, the story grows even more intense because this year represents a perfect collision between economics, urgency, and human error, a collision that numismatists still study with almost obsessive passion, because when copper prices surged to the point where the metal inside a penny was nearly worth more than the penny itself, the U.S. Mint faced enormous pressure to act quickly, and that urgency meant procedures that were normally clean and controlled became rushed, transitional, and sometimes poorly documented, and in such environments mistakes do not just happen, they multiply, and the Denver Mint in particular was producing massive quantities of cents to meet circulation demand while simultaneously adapting to new zinc planchets, new plating processes, and new quality control standards, all while old copper blanks still existed within the system. And this overlap is the breeding ground for what collectors dream about, because even one copper planchet slipping into a zinc-only production run at Denver would create a coin that officially should not exist, a coin that contradicts mint policy, and contradiction is one of the most powerful forces in numismatic value, because collectors are drawn to objects that challenge official narratives, and a confirmed 1982 D copper cent does exactly that. And while only a tiny handful of such pieces have ever been rumored, the mere possibility drives relentless searching, weighing, and testing of millions of pennies, because the difference between zinc and copper is not visible at a glance, it must be felt, weighed, and understood, and that subtlety is what allowed such coins to potentially escape detection for decades, hiding in circulation, drawers, or collections labeled as ordinary, and beyond copper versus zinc, the plating process itself introduced new failure points. Because zinc cents rely on a thin copper coating, and when that plating fails, bubbles, blisters, cracks, or missing areas appear, sometimes exposing the gray zinc core beneath. And while many plating errors exist, the most dramatic examples with large missing sections, peeling copper, or uneven thickness can become highly desirable, especially when combined with other errors like off-center strikes or die doubling, and in rare theoretical cases, a plating error could even mask or reveal an underlying wrong planchet strike, making the discovery even more shocking once properly analyzed. And then there is the role of die wear and die fatigue, because as dies aged and production continued at high speed, details softened, cracks formed, and metal flowed in unusual ways, sometimes creating ghost-like images, distorted letters, or extra thickness in parts of the design. And while some collectors dismiss such coins as damaged or worn, trained eyes recognize patterns that indicate genuine mint origin anomalies. And when these anomalies appear on a transitional year coin like 1982 D, their importance is amplified, because context matters as much as appearance, and context is exactly why values climb so high, because collectors are not just buying metal, they are buying evidence of a moment when the system bent under pressure. And another fascinating possibility involves mule-style errors, where mismatched dies from different production stages could theoretically have been paired. And while no publicly confirmed 1982 D-cent mule has surfaced, the logic of the transition year makes it plausible that unusual die pairings could have occurred, especially during testing or early runs. And if such a coin were ever discovered, pairing a Denver obverse with an unexpected reverse or experimental die, it would instantly become one of the most important modern U.S. coin discoveries ever made, because mule errors are among the most prized in numismatics due to their sheer improbability. And then there is the human factor of discovery itself, because the first verified example of any new major error always commands the highest premium, not only because it is rare, but because it becomes the reference point, the coin that future discoveries are compared against, and that first discovered status carries enormous prestige, and prestige drives price. And when you combine prestige with a series as beloved and widely collected as the Lincoln cent, You create a scenario where elite collectors, investors, and even institutions are willing to stretch far beyond traditional valuations, because ownership becomes about legacy as much as money, and that is how discussions reach figures like $29 million, not as a casual claim, but as a reflection of what could happen if the ultimate 1982 D-era coin were authenticated, graded at the highest level, and offered publicly under intense global attention. And it is important to understand that at this level the sale price is not just determined by rarity, but by narrative timing, media exposure, and competition, because when the story captures the public imagination, prices can surge beyond what logic alone would suggest, and we have seen this repeatedly in numismatic history, where once obscure coins suddenly become household names after a headline-grabbing auction, and the 1982 descent has all the ingredients needed for such a moment: a dramatic metal transition, conflicting records, ongoing debate, and the tantalizing possibility that more examples could still exist, undiscovered. And that possibility keeps collectors searching rolls, hoards, and collections even today, decades later, because unlike ancient coins locked in museums, modern pennies are still accessible, still searchable, still within reach of ordinary people, and that accessibility fuels hope, and hope fuels the hunt, and the hunt fuels the legend. And this is why the 1982 D penny story refuses to fade, because every year new collectors enter the hobby, learn about the copper versus zinc shift, buy a scale, and start weighing coins, and every time someone finds a coin that weighs just a little too much, hearts race, imaginations ignite, and the dream feels suddenly real. And while most such finds turn out to be plated, altered, or misread, the process itself keeps the legend alive, because legends do not need constant confirmation to survive, they thrive on possibility, and the 1982 descent is a masterclass in possibility, reminding us that even in an age of automation and precision, mistakes can still slip through, and when they do, they can transform the most ordinary object into something extraordinary, something that carries not just monetary value but the power to inspire curiosity, patience, and a deeper appreciation for the hidden complexity of everyday things. And as this story continues to evolve with each new discovery, rumor, and analysis, one truth remains constant: that the 1982 D1 cent coin stands as one of the most fascinating chapters in modern American coinage. A chapter that proves that history is not only written in books and monuments, but also quietly stamped into metal, sometimes imperfectly, sometimes accidentally, and sometimes in ways that can change a life forever.